in this part of the tutorial, now we're going to get into some rigging. This is the fun part. We're going to start off by rigging the torso, and then we'll work our way out from there. So let's get into rigging the torso. So once you've opened After Effects, what you're going to do is we're going to import our files. So go to File, Import, File. Then you're going to go and find the Illustrator file where your character was designed. When you have it selected, come down here to Import as Composition. What this is going to do is it's going to import all of our layers separately so we don't have to do it one by one. And import. So now what it did was it created a composition for us based on our Illustrator size, and it brought in all of our different layers. So I'm going to go inside of Character 1, Composition, and if you hit Control K on the keyboard, it'll bring up your composition settings, and you should notice that the frame rate should be at 29.97. That's typically what I animate at, roughly 29.97. Some people animate at 12, others animate at 24. My preference has always been 29.97. Your duration doesn't need to be very long. You could probably just drop it down to 1 minute. But what you should also notice is that the width and height is 1920 by 1080. And that's what we're going for. So now, what I'm going to do is I'm going to find all of the different layers that are associated to the torso. And for me, that is the torso, that is the neck, and I also added a bag. So that's another thing you might notice that's different. In my original sketch, I had a tote bag with them, so I put it in there. Once you have those three selected, do Control-Shift-C, and that's going to bring up a new composition that you're going to create. You can label this one Torso, and then hit Enter. Now we're going to go inside the torso, and the first thing we can do, we don't need all of this size to our composition. So right down here, there's a little square, and it's called Region of Interest. And when you select it, and you also select a layer, we'll select the torso. We can drag a little box around our torso. You don't want to make it too tight around the torso that you're making, but we're just trying to trim off some of that size because we don't need it. And once you have a nice little box like this around your torso, what you can do is go Composition, Composition, and then Crop Comp to Region of Interest. I'm sorry, I was thinking, I got ahead of myself. You don't need to select any layers. We were just in the composition. Okay, now we have a smaller composition. This is perfect. Now you select your torso, and we're going to mask out our torso because we have so many different torsos associated with this one layer. We need to define the one that we're going to be using. So right here in this front layer, I'm going to draw a mask around it. I'll actually solo it out so we can see it. We're going to draw a mask around it, and you can keep it kind of tight. And then what we're going to do is we're going to key the mask path, and then hold Shift P on the keyboard. And then we're going to key our position. Now we can hit U while torso is selected, and these are our keyframes. So what we're going to do now, and this is cool because this is where we create our rotation. We're going to work on it layer by layer. Let's turn on our title action safe, and I want to make sure that the torso is in fact centered. Mine's just a little bit off. So I'm just going to move it over. Now the next thing we can do is hit page down, and we're going to hit Y on the keyboard, and we are going to pan over to our next torso. And to make sure that these are in alignment, meaning that they don't jump back and forth, but they actually spin on themselves, you can do page up and page down just to make sure your alignment is pretty good. It doesn't have to be absolutely perfect, but you want it to be pretty close. Now we'll do page down again, and we'll just move it over. And we're going to continue this until we get to the end. And then this is my final one. Look at that, those hindquarters. And then because the front and the back are the same shape, you can make sure that they are in alignment. One thing we need to do, and I kind of got ahead of myself, is because Duik looks at the slider or the joystick in a beginning and an end state. The middle state is where it defaults to. This is where it puts that joystick. And because it puts it at default in the middle, you want the middle to be the front of your character. So in order for the front of your character to be in the middle, that means that our first frame has to actually be the back of the character. And as we transition on our timeline this way, it would go to the center or the front of our character. So it goes from back to center. So what we have to do, that was a long-winded explanation, is we have to put our center here, and then now it rotates, and we have to turn our character to the other side now. It's confusing, but just follow with me. So what we're going to do is I'm going to go back one, hold Control S. I'm sorry. We do need to save it. I'm sorry. Alt S. Oh, Shift S. What am I? Do I know After Effects? I don't know. Hold Shift X, Shift S, and we're going to key it in the middle. So now our scale is keyed, and then we're going to hit page up to a section where we don't have any keyframes, and we're going to put this 3/4 turn here, but facing the opposite direction. So what we have to do is we now have to scale it to the negative and hit enter. I'm going to position it back to the middle and hit Y, and now we can put our 3/4 view in the opposite direction. So you see what's happening now? I hope that made sense. All we're doing is scaling. We scaled it to the negative, and now we're going to go backwards from here to the beginning. So now keep it on Y, and we're going to continue this transition till we get to the back of our character. So by the end of it, it will be a seamless transition from the back of the character to the front of the character, and then back to the back of the character. So let's just make sure these backs line up. All right. That looks good. And then we can just move this over one keyframe. So now if we go to the beginning of our character and then to the last keyframe and hit N, when we play it, it should do a perfect circle. Boom. Doesn't that look awesome? All right, we did it. So now we have our character spinning. But there's one thing we have to add. We need a neck. So I'm going to hit U, keep those open. I'm going to go to the middle keyframe, and I'm going to turn my neck on. And this, I'm actually not going to animate the position of the neck at all. So I'm going to keep it here spinning, and the body will just spin around the neck. But what we do need is that mask. Remember how we talked about a mask? So I'm going to get my pen tool. I'm going to start to create a mask at the bottom of my collar. And this is going to mask out the bottom of the neck. And what I can do is I select the neck, hit toggle switches, and then right here there's something called track matte. If you select this one and hit the shape layer, you'll see it masked out the neck, but it's in the opposite direction. So that's simple to fix. You just come right over here, and we're going to invert the mask. And now we have a mask on it. So just make sure it all lines up nicely. You get a nice, you can see the stroke on it and everything. One thing that's going to happen with the neck is you have limitations. So for me, I have a collar. At some point, the neck's going to run into the collar, and you're going to see that split. It's going to intersect with the collar, and it's just not going to work. So there are limitations. So let's hit Y on the keyboard with neck selected. And what we're going to do is find this little anchor point, and we're going to put it right down here where we think the neck is going to start to rotate. You don't want it too high because then the neck's going to do a full spin in the middle. You want it down low so the neck kind of rotates around the sternum. And so you can see I have neck movement, but I have limitations. And that's because my collar is so high. If I didn't have a collar at all, then this would work a lot better. But my collar kind of limits me from moving my head too much. I could probably pull this in a little bit. That might help. Let's see. Not really. But that's okay. Typically my neck doesn't move a lot when my characters are interacting or talking. So what we're going to do is we are going to keyframe this shape. So in your shape layer or your mask, I'm going to rename it. We'll call it neck mask. What we'll do is we'll go into the contents, the shape, and we're going to key the path. And now as we page up and page down on the keyboard, the body's going to rotate, and we can move these shape layers back into position. And for my collar, I have to bump this one up and this one out. We'll pull this one in. I'll probably just pull this out too. Yeah, that's fine. Let's hit page down one more time. Make sure that it is staying in line with our shape of our neck. I'm sorry, the shape of our collar. That's looking good. I'll just pull this one all the way down. And that should be it. We're going to tackle something different here because the neck cannot be in front. You could change the shape layer to mask that out, but I'm going to do something a little more simple. So now we have to go back to the other direction. Keyframe this shape. Pull this out, and then one more, and then we'll be done. All right, so the neck mask is finished. what we have to do at this point is we're going to duplicate the neck, and then we are going to put neck 2 below the torso. And then neck 1, we're going to hold Shift T, or just T. Man, I am having the worst trouble with these shortcuts. Okay, hit T, and then as soon as the torso turns and we see the back, we're going to turn the opacity off. So we'll key it 100, and then we'll turn it off here. So you see how it switches like that? And we're going to move forward. We'll key it here just before it turns off. We'll go forward 1, and then we'll turn it off. So neck 2 in the back, opacity stays on all the time. Neck layer in the front is only on when the front of the chest is visible. So now we have this beautiful thing spinning around the neck. Next thing I want to do is we are going to create a new null object. I'm going to hit Y on the keyboard and just center out that anchor point to the middle. And then I'm going to push it just to the bottom of my torso. And what I'm going to do is call this squash in stretch. And then I'm going to create one more null object. I'm going to put the anchor point to the middle. And I'm going to put that right at where my neck is going to spin. Or not spin, but rotate. And then I'm going to call this neck rotate. And then I'm going to attach my necks to it, so that as this spins, the neck will spin. And then I'm going to take, now I'm going to take the torso. I'm going to rig my bag later. That's another headache that I don't want to get into right now. But I'm going to take torso, bag, and neck rotate. And I'm going to attach it to squash and stretch. And on squash and stretch, I'm going to come right to the middle. I'm going to key the scale at 100. And I'm going to come all the way to the beginning. And this is where I'm going to stretch out my character. So I don't want it to stretch too much. So let's see if maybe, whoops, let's try 95 in and then 110. Okay, that feels good. And then let's go to the end frame and we're going to reverse it. So we'll go 110 down to, I don't know, maybe 90. Oh, we forgot to, I'm sorry. You have to attach the mask also to your squash and stretch. Okay. So this probably looks pretty funky right now and you're wondering like, okay, so you've got all this stuff, but now what? So another thing that we have to do is we have to create control points for our shoulders to rotate with the body. So the body's spinning, but we want to automate a system to where the arms stay in line with the shoulders. So what we're going to do is create two more null objects. I'm going to center out the anchor points. I'm going to call this one left arm. I'll duplicate it and call this one right arm. And just so that these are not like getting in the way too much, I'm going to scale them down a little bit. So right arm is, what is it, on this side? And then left arm is on this side. And I'm going to key the positions. So hit P on the keyboard, key it, and as it, I'm going to move this scale for a second because, actually, I'm just going to delete it. We'll come back to that. I think I jumped the gun a little bit. So as it rotates to his, what is that, to his left, I need this shoulder to come over. Maybe we'll do 4, and this one will come back. Maybe we'll do 4. And we're just going to continue this process. Each shoulder moving backward and the other one moving forward. So this is a big jump actually, so that one's going to come way over here. And this one's going to come way back here. Which makes me wonder if, no, that's good. So then there's a big jump, and then we move to the back. Now the thing about the back is the shoulders should be in the same position as they are when they're in the front. So what we have to do is, I'm sorry, not the same position, opposite positions, but in the same spatial position, if that makes sense. So right arm will actually be where left arm was, so we can copy that and put it here. And then right arm will be where left arm was. So then we'll copy that, put that there. So now we have these null objects that rotate perfectly. Now we have to go back the opposite direction. So what we'll do is we will continue our trajectory. We'll do 4 movements, or however many it takes you, really. I'm not sure how big your character is or how small they are. And then we have a big jump, big jump, big jump, and then finally back to where they started. Perfect. So now we have these null objects that are rotating with the body. It's beautiful. This is where it gets tricky. So we have to separate these dimensions. We have these null objects traveling on an X plane. But the way that Duik processes the information, it has to separate the X from the Y. So we need to separate our dimensions so that our X moves independently of the Y. So select our positions. And then what we're going to do is right click, and we're going to separate dimensions. So on our Y positions, we're going to delete those. So we still have the movement in the X. So what has to happen now is right here in the middle, we're going to key our Y position. Right here, where we're going to scale, we have to move our shoulders up to match the stretch that we're trying to achieve. So that as we stretch the body up, the shoulders, which our arms are connected to, move up with the body as it stretches. So what we're going to do is we're going to move this upward. I'm not entirely sure. This is going to be a little trial and error to figure out how high it needs to go and how low it needs to go. So 140 feels, or 144, it looks pretty good. Let's do that here. So now it goes up and it comes down, and then now it comes all the way down because we are squashing the body. So remember, at 0 on our timeline is stretched all the way to the end of our timeline, which is squashed. So now we're going to go in the opposite direction. We'll squish it down, 184. Let's try that. That looks good. 184. So now we have up and down movement in our shoulders. and we have left and right movement in our shoulders. And this is the most complicated part. It's very difficult to think in that mindset of separating dimensions. So I hope you get it. Watch this over and over if it doesn't make any sense. But finally, what we need to do is, well, one, we need to take all of our keyframes. Actually, we need to do our squash and stretch again. So right here in the middle, we'll do 0. Or I'm sorry, 100%. We'll come all the way to the beginning of the timeline. We'll do, what was it, 95 to 110. And then we come to the end, and then we do 110 to 90. And that looks pretty good. Let's look at our, oh yeah, see how our shoulders move up? They come down to the middle, and then they squash. So is this a good visual reference for you? So the shoulders come up and down with the body squashing and stretching. When we connect everything together and it's rigged, it should make more sense. Is there anything else? We need to do the same thing with the legs, but thankfully we don't have to worry about the up and down because the body is only squashing and stretching from the hips. The legs are not going to go up and down. So let's, I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to add a left hip and a right hip, and I'm going to do the same transition thing as I did for the shoulders. So now I've finished the hips. I have a pair of hips that rotate around the body as well as a pair of shoulders that rotate around the body. Next thing we need to do is we're going to select all the keyframes, right click, we're going to do toggle keyframe hold, with the exception of one thing. Squash and stretch does not need to be toggle held, so you can control click to turn it off so that it is a smooth up and down transition. The other thing we're going to need to do is all of our layers, they need to have a beginning keyframe and an end keyframe in order for the connection to work. So anywhere there, if you come to 0 on our timeline, anywhere there is not a keyframe, make sure you put one in. There we go. And now come to the end of our timeline, and then make sure you put a keyframe wherever there is not one. And also, make sure that those keyframes that you just added are have a toggle hold on them. Okay, so now we can, oh, another thing I forgot to mention, make sure that your rasterized layers is turned on all of your Adobe Illustrator files. Okay, coming into Character 1 composition, what you're going to need to do is possibly you'll need to relocate your body. Mine is way out of whack, and that's because I did not do a great job lining my character to the center. So I'm just going to reposition it back to its original resting state. That looks pretty good to me. Okay, now that that is done, what we're going to do is deselect all of your layers. You're going to come over into Duik Bassel. And when you open it up, there's going to be an option called, inside of rigging, it's called links and constraints. So go ahead, click on that. And then down below is something called connector. To the right of connector is a little dot, a little circle. Click on that circle. And what we're going to do is create a 2D slider control. Click on that, and it's going to make one like magic. Boom. So this is what's going to control or power our body rotation. Right now it does nothing because nothing is connected to it. With it selected, make sure you select the red circle, the 2D slider, come back into your torso composition, and we're going to select all of our keyframes with the exception of squash and stretch. So hold shift to deselect, and anything with a Y position. So this goes for our arms. So deselect the Y position for your left arm, and the Y position for your right arm. So those three things need to be deselected. Again, Y position for right arm, Y position for left arm, and squash and stretch. With everything else selected, come back into, actually you don't need to come back. We're going to come over to Duik Bassel, and right here is an option called Connect to Properties, and we're going to click that. When you click it, it's going to connect all of these keyframes we made and connect them to our slider, or our joystick. So now when we rotate it, look at that. It does the magic. The next thing we need to do is now select all the keyframes that we didn't before. Y position for the shoulders and squash and stretch. Coming back to Duik Bassel, there's an option here under Axis. Right now it's selected at X. We're going to go to Y. Click that and then connect to Properties. Now when we come back, our joystick should be working perfectly. We have up and down squash and stretch and a body rotation. Look at that. So we did it. Part 1, step 1, done. We have our body rotating and squashing and stretching with all the control points we need to get started. So now we're going to go on and work for the head. We're going to connect the head up the same way we did the body, and we're going to connect that to the body and make the rig even more fun. So let's get into that.